Sorry if I cough at all during this. I have a slight cold. But anyways, diversity is mostly considered a very important part of our day-to-day lives. It's in our work, our school, our sports, clubs, everywhere should have a bit of a diversity. The LinkedIn video that we watched talked about how everyone has an innate need to feel like they belong, and that's extremely true. No one wants to feel out of place, and especially not somewhere that you'll be spending a lot of your time, like your workplace. The TED Talk by June Sarpong, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, discussed how including a DEI program in the workplace not only boosts creativity but also profits, which highlights just how important and valuable DEI is. But as much change as we've made, we need to do more. She goes on to tell us about how 90% of Fortune 500 leaders are males, and not just that, they're white males. And going on, the article that we read by the Sierra Club discussed how they had implemented the YEMES principles. The YEMES principles are essentially a set of guidelines that were made for environmental organizations that were mostly white, who wanted to work with low-income communities as well as people of color. The club details how the principles directly relate to their mission statement and how they help work towards their goal of establishing genuine partnerships among communities. On the other side of things, the Prager University video talked about how the woke mob has taken over the DEI side of things. Their main point that they made was that by using DEI, companies push down white men that are deserving of the job in favor of people of color, women, and gay people. The video defends their argument by saying that interracial marriage rates are higher than ever, and it says that including DEI is basically stating that people of marginalized communities can't do it themselves, and is actually demeaning to marginalized communities. My opinion is that the Prager University's video is one of the worst arguments I've ever heard. I do agree that we definitely need to be looking at who is most qualified for the job, but also heavily consider who would add most to the team. And yes, sometimes the white man will be rejected in favor of a woman or a person of color or a gay person, whatever. But they still have such an advantage in so many aspects of life. That's not something that's changed. We're not saying that marginalized communities aren't worthy of jobs. We're saying that they're marginalized. They're at a disadvantage for something that, like, they can't control. All we're asking for is an equal shot at the job. Companies will have the most success if they reflect the world and not just one small part of it. Going back to the LinkedIn video, we all crave to belong. By implementing DEI, companies foster accepting communities, which in today's world is so important. And from what I've seen, my generation is very passionate about DEI, and if you are against DEI, we draw the fairly correct conclusion that you are still holding on to archaic ideals and are against people other than straight white men feeling like it belongs simply because you don't like us. Unfortunately, this is the real world. They are going to have to accept that the world is more progressive now, which is a good thing, and if they try to push back against that in favor of their own ideals, they're not going to be well liked. And a workplace without DEI and full of those sorts of people has the potential to be an extremely hostile environment. Marginalized communities are just asking to have equal respect. So again, we all want to belong, and feeling comfortable when we're around people we have things in common with, and DEI is pushing towards everyone feeling comfortable in their work community. I think that DEI aims for everyone to feel like they belong based on things that we have in common, going beyond what our first impressions are, based on race, color, sex, whatever. And this is going to make the video longer than it should be, so you can ignore this part, but to add a real-world example, my mom is a chief digital engineer at SAIC. She's allowed to hire her specialized teams. One of her teams is extremely diverse. It is mostly women and half made of women of color, and a couple of that half is they are refugees. However, this does not mean that she just only hires women of color, whatever, and pushes white men down. Her other specialized team is made up of mostly white men. She hires based on skill and what they can bring to the team. However, she's had to fire many white men simply because they've never had a female superior and don't respect her authority. They don't know how to act right. I've heard her subordinates yell at her on calls, her male subordinates, I should say. SAIC works closely with the U.S. military, and my mom goes and works closely with the Department of Defense. That means that she works with many military men. They almost all go by their call signs that they used in the military. I've heard some really weird ones. But she can't even go by her nickname that everyone but her coworkers use, because she's learned that if she gives the men that she works with an inch, they take it a mile. So yes, while we've made steps in the right direction, we clearly have lots of work still to do. We haven't taken over the world yet with our wokeness, if that's what you want to call, being acceptive, inclusive, yet, Prager University, but that's the goal. And I have to say, for the racism isn't real, interracial marriages are an all-time high point that they tried to make in that video. Many white men marry women from other cultures that raise their girls, their women, to be obedient to the men in their lives. So, like, just recently, Republican Vice President candidate J.D. Vance talked about his wife, who is a child of Indian immigrants, saying, obviously she's not a white person, but I love Usha. Usha, I think is the way you pronounce it. She's a good mom. So just because interracial marriages are at a high rate doesn't automatically mean that there's no racism or sexism present within. So again, still lots of work to do, and I think DEI could really, really help it.